Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Shooting the Shit Uncensored. I am your host, Piers Austin, and we are coming to you live from Multi-Continental Wrestling Alliance on Facebook and on YouTube. But we are also very, very lucky to be streaming this interview in Wrestling Maniacs, Wrestling Maniacs, WWE Wrestling Evolution, and WCW Nation. Wow, I almost cocked that up completely. Sorry, guys. Also, I want to say a special thank you to Mikey Mados, who makes us all this beautiful imagery that you see coming up on your screens right before our show. And now next, I just want to say a quick special thank you to our wonderful sponsors. First up is Signal Studios. They are a recording studio based in Sydney, Australia. If you need a place to go and record some music, or if you just need somewhere that can send you some music, maybe you're a wrestler that needs a new entrance theme, my boy Rafi can make it, hook it up, and send it out to you. Contact him on Facebook, guys. Also next is Mayan Belts. Mayan Belts make the best championship belts in the I was about to swear, but I won't, in the world. They make the best custom championship belts, or if you want a replica of your favorite WWE or WCW or whatever company it is, they can make you it as well, and it is going to look outstanding. Contact Eddie and Ira Williams on Facebook, and he'll be able to hit you up and give you some pricing on some belts. Next is A-Rock Designs. A-Rock Designs is run by my good friend Ashley Rodriguez in Georgia in the United States. She makes custom tumblers, cups, keychains, hoodies, t-shirts, you name it, she makes it with a wrestling theme. But she's also doing stuff that aren't wrestling themed. I've got 3 cups on my way from Ashley, and I can't wait to get them. And when I do, I'll make sure to show them off for you guys. My last but not least sponsor is Immortal Restoning. Now, Immortal Restoning is a new company. It's just opened up by my friend Jeff Parthay. Now, if you've got an old championship belt that you just need to get it, redo it up a little bit, get it shiny again, get those stones replaced, contact Jeff Parthay on Facebook, and he'll be able to look after you. Tell him I sent you, and it's not going to get you a deal, but as my friend Kevin says, it's always good when someone's mentioning your name. Now to the guest of the evening that I'm about to bring out. She is the Python Powerhouse. She is SDL, Steph De Lander. Welcome to Shooting the Shit, Steph. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. And how are you?
I am fantastic. I'm really excited to be talking to you this evening. I've been, I've seen your name pop up over the last year or two in the Australian wrestling scene, and I've been loving seeing some of your matches. And I'm really hoping once this quarantine gets out, that I'll be able to come and see you live in the ring, maybe down in Newey Pro or PWA once the quarantine sort of ends. But besides that, I'm doing very, very well. But Steph, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Whereabouts did you grow up? Where are you from?
So initially I was actually born in Melbourne, and I lived in Melbourne until I was 5. And then I moved to Sydney with my parents and my brother. And then ever since then, I've been living in Sydney. But my heritage is I'm half Maltese.
Oh, wow. So's my wife, actually. So there you go.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Maybe you're related somewhere down the line. But
probably. There's not that many of us. We probably could be.
Exactly. So, growing up, you said you moved over from Melbourne to Sydney when you were about 5 years old. What was it like growing up? And were you watching a lot of wrestling from a young age? When was it that really sort of got you hooked in professional wrestling?
So the first time I watched wrestling, I was, I think, 10 years old. I grew up with an older brother, and whatever he did, I did. So whatever phase he went through, I went through that with him, and one of them was wrestling. So my dad got Foxtel to watch sport when we moved to Sydney, because in Melbourne, he was really into the AFL, came to Sydney, and AFL wasn't just on normal TV. So he made us get Foxtel. And then my brother and I were flicking through all the channels, and then we stumbled upon Raw, and we were like, oh, what's this WWE Raw? And from that moment, I was just completely hooked. The first memory I have was when Triple H and Ric Flair were feuding, and this was in 2005, I think. And I just remember seeing that, and I was like, I don't even know what this is, but this is the coolest thing in the world. And I was just hooked.
That was quite a feud, if I remember. Like I remember, Ric Flair being all bloodied and battered.
Yeah, the
I
screwdriver
yeah, I can't imagine like a 10-year-old girl sitting there and just being like, "Wow, this is what I what I love." But
yeah.
but like, was it at that moment where you sort of went, you know what, I want to be a pro wrestler, or was it something that came much later to you?
I mean, in that moment, I loved it so much. It was my favorite thing. Like, I had all the WWE tracksuit pants, and I had the WWE book covering on my school books. Like anything I could have WWE, I had. Like I was obsessed with it, but I didn't know that professional wrestling existed in Australia. I didn't. I mean, when you think about it, at that point, WWE, I don't think had any Australians under contract. So it seemed like such a far and away goal that at that moment I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler, because I didn't know how. I didn't even know where you would begin. I didn't like, it seemed like such a far away thing. I remember I used to look at the WWE website, and they would have like a recruitment kind of page. And it would be like, to make an application, you need 3 years professional wrestling experience. So before I knew that indies existed, I was like, well, how do you get 3 years experience before you wrestle? You know what I mean? Like that didn't even make sense in my brain. So it wasn't until much later that I realized independent wrestling existed. I realized Australian independent wrestling existed. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is achievable. And this is really what I want to do.
How old were you when you found Australian wrestling?
So I was 18. So I was a pretty late kind of bloomer. I wasn't someone that was into Australian indies like long before I started wrestling. But I think a lot of that is because there was no, and there still isn't any independent wrestling anywhere near where I live. So like I drive 2 hours to train, multiple times a week, because there's just absolutely no wrestling on the Northern Beaches. So yeah, growing up obviously, and in my early teens, I just didn't know it was a thing. It wasn't until I kind of got Twitter and I met wrestling friends through Twitter. And then I met one of my really good friends. Her name is Desiree. She's a really great friend of mine, and she's also a wrestling fan. And she was like, hey, she used to come with me to like the WWE signings and, all the WWE events. And she was like, there's wrestling here, right? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, they do this, but they do it here. And I was like, what? Like, surely not. And then she took me to a Newey Pro show. And I remember I saw my coach, Madison Eagles, wrestle. And I just thought she was the coolest thing on the planet. And I was like, oh my God, I need to do this. It's funny. I guess this is a normal thing, but I never thought I was good enough. I never thought I was enough of an athlete. I thought I was too big. Like I thought I was too tall to wrestle, which is so dumb when you think about it. But
Absolutely.
as a kid though, I used to get the, what are they called? Like the programs, and I would study everyone's stats and everything like that. And my favorites were Trish and Mickey, and their heights in there were probably like 5'2" or something. Yeah. And as like a 12-year-old girl, I was probably already taller than that. So I was like, well, I mean, I'm not 5'2", 60 kilos. I can't be a female wrestler, because the era that I grew up in watching female wrestling was very different to what it is now. You wouldn't see girls that look like me on TV. And that was the mindset that I had. So I thought that I couldn't wrestle. And it actually wasn't until I saw Madison Eagles, my coach, wrestling, who is 6'1", and that's a real 6'1". That's not a joke. Yeah. And I was like, holy cow, like I can do this. She can do this. I can do this. And that was kind of what lit the fire for me.
Well, you mentioned Madison Eagles being your coach, and to those who don't know who Madison Eagle is, go out and Google her. She is probably one of the most underrated professional wrestlers in the world today. She is amazing in the ring, and she's trained a lot of professional wrestlers. How was it, obviously meeting her for the first time, obviously would have been, a little bit intimidating as well. But, how was it, going and meeting her and starting that sort of, window or walkway into the professional wrestling training world?
Madison Eagles is terrifying. She was as terrifying on the first day I met her as she is this week. You know what I mean? She's just one of those people where she has that presence that you know that she's someone important. You know, she walks in the room and everyone in the room just stops because you know that someone special is there. So being able to be around her and learn from her constantly is constantly intimidating, but I think it's because you know that you're so lucky. Like, there are so many wrestlers in the world that would love to train with Madison for 1 week. And we get to train with her day in and day out, and we get her knowledge and we get her experience. So it's just crazy. I feel like I've stumbled upon gold being able to learn underneath Madison.
Yeah, I had the great fortune of interviewing LaFisto a couple of days ago, who's a very well-known wrestler on the indies. For those who don't know, go check LaFisto out. She is a legend in women's wrestling, and she mentioned Madison Eagles in the interview and said that she is one of the most, and she even said, she's like, she does not get the respect that she deserves. She should be, you know, way up here. And, you know, she even said she couldn't put her over enough. But, you know, when you got into the training and things like that, when you took that first bump, that first back bump, what was that like for you? Like, I ask all pretty much every one of my guests like this, because some of them say, oh, I loved it straight away, and others went, it took me a little while to get used to. But how did you find it when you got in there? Like, when you took that first bump, was it like, this is where I belong, this is what I should be doing? Or was it like, oh, I didn't know what I'm in for here?
I remember the next day that I woke up from training the first time, like the first time I took bumps, I remember every single part of my body was so sore. I felt like I got hit by a bus, and I woke up and I was like, man, I love wrestling, right? I love it.
Yeah.
But if this is how it feels every single day, I don't know if I can do it. I was like, I don't know if I have this in me. But I remember in my tryout, Robbie Eagles, who took my tryout, he said, he was like, guys, the first few weeks you are going to be in unimaginable pain, but your body gets used to it. It will get better. So I just had that in the back of my head being like, it will get better. It will get better. And he was right. You do get used to it. I mean, I'm sure the first bump I take after all this quarantine stuff's probably going to be pretty nasty, but yeah, it's something that your body does get used to for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It's getting repetitions in. It's like training for the first time or lifting weights for the first time. You're going to be feeling it for the next 2 days, but getting those reps in continuously gets that body prepared for it. But when did you actually make your debut in professional wrestling?
So I had my first match on shows in April of 2017 as the Facebook character. So I was a luchadora for about a year before I was Steph De Lander. So I was completely different.
Yeah. Was there a reason by putting you as a luchador type character before that? Like, were you with a mask or?
Yeah, I had a mask. Yeah, I had a full mask.
Was it to sort of? Yeah. Was it? Did they think of doing that? It was like, okay, we need to cover her because we can do something with her later on down the track once she gets a bit more seasoning?
Not really. So in PWA, we had a stable called SMS, and there was Unsocial Jordan, Snapchat, Instagram, who is now Carl Fletcher in the UK, and they needed a girl. And I was pretty close to being show ready. And I remember they came up to me and said, Steph, we're offering, would you like to be Facebook? And I was like, yeah, of course I would. To me, that was a way to get on shows. And it was also a way to spend a lot of time around the guys and learn from them because they're all really knowledgeable people. And also managing, like coming in as a manager gave me a little bit of experience in front of a crowd while I was still learning to wrestle. So by the time I was having matches, I was already a bit more comfortable in front of a crowd. So I always knew that it was going to be like a short-term thing. I didn't expect to be Facebook for the rest of my career, but I just saw it as like a good entry into the wrestling business pretty much.
Yeah, sure. And how long were you training before you made your debut in 2017?
I was training for about 18 months, I would say, maybe a little bit less. Yeah, so I guess everyone varies with how long they train before they get on shows and that kind of thing. But for me, it was about 18 months.
Yeah, well, I suppose it also depends on the person, how quickly that they're picking that sort of stuff up as well. So, but yeah, with 18 months, is that pretty much the standard, or was that an advanced? Did you find that you were picking things up quite quickly?
I mean, I would say for PWA trainees, 18 months is probably pretty standard. There's not many people that are going to be getting on shows before at least 12 months. I know some other training schools, people get put on shows much earlier, but I know that the way that we work at the PWA Academy is we would rather people train for a little bit longer and make sure that they're completely safe and comfortable in what they're doing before they get on shows.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and there's probably not many companies that are out there that have that sort of mentality. But it's better to do that because it's safer for the person getting in the ring who's going to wrestle, but also the person that they're wrestling later on down the track. And if getting in there a bit too early is, that's where accidents happen if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly, and that happens a lot, especially with female wrestlers, because girls are generally harder to come by than guys. So companies are so early to rush girls onto shows, but that's the thing. There's such a risk that comes with putting someone that's not trained properly on show. And also the other side of it as well is you have to think, especially in this day and age, so many shows are live streamed, every show's filmed, you'd have no idea where it's going to end up. I wouldn't want to have a body of work online of me that I'm not proud of. Like, I can look back at my earliest matches and go, yeah, like I did pretty well for that. Like I don't really have much floating out there that I'm really embarrassed of. So I'm glad that that's the case. I'm glad that, I'm sure in the moment a year in, I was itching to get in the ring and I couldn't understand why and this, that, whatever, like a stupid brat. And now I understand. But yeah, I'm glad that I don't have a whole bunch of really terrible matches out there that are going to be on YouTube for the next 10 years, So I'm really happy with how everything turned out.
And, pre-coronavirus, how healthy would you say women's wrestling is in Australia as a whole?
Thriving. Absolutely thriving. Yeah, I mean, you just have to have a look around and see how many girls there are and how many great girls there are. And there's a lot of female wrestlers in this country in the first couple of years of their careers that are just doing absolutely fantastic things. Like the training standard is so high for so many of our schools that girls in their first year or first 2 years are having really great matches. So it just makes you think like, wow, where is this girl going to be in 4 years' time? Like it's not just quantity. It's not just we have 20 female wrestlers. We have probably 15 to 20 really good female wrestlers or girls that are on their way to becoming really good. So I think that's just a testament to the training that we have in Australia and also the work ethic. As an Australian wrestler, it's quite hard to get noticed. Now we're starting to get more eyes on the country, but before, a couple of years ago, the guys and girls had to work really, really hard to get noticed on an international level. Like the work that people like Robbie Eagles and Shazza McKenzie and Madison Eagles and Mick Moretti and everyone that's traveled internationally to get themselves known, they've had to go out and work for that. And I think that work ethic has been passed down onto their students, onto the next generation, because I think everyone's really hungry to kind of get noticed and make Australian wrestling as big as it can be. And I think that is kind of what edges us above, some other places in the world, is because everyone here is just like so damn hungry and just everyone wants the opportunities.
But that's the thing. You mentioned, where Australian wrestling is now, and you look at WWE for an example. There's Rhea Ripley, there's Buddy Murphy, Tony Storm. Like, the Australians are starting to get noticed, but they're also starting to get these prominent roles on the main roster and in NXT. And as an Australian wrestling fan, I'm looking at this and going, this is fantastic. I've been, a fan of wrestling my whole life and been a fan of Aussie wrestling my whole life. So I've always known that there's Australian talent out there, but it's great to see that Australian talent is now getting recognized on that international platform. and even Shazza McKenzie, being able to do some stuff with AEW is massive. It's, it speaks volumes for the Australian workers that are going out there and really grinding for it, and it's showing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you mentioned, WWE has so many Australian talents at the moment, and they've all, done really well with what they've been given. Even recently, since quarantine's been happening, with Elliot Sexton and Shane Thorne getting on TV, Indy Hartwell being on TV now as well. Like, even the guys that haven't been there for very long are absolutely killing it. Same with Jonah Rock. There's you forget how ridiculous. I'm forgetting how many Australian wrestlers are signed to WWE. Like, what a cool problem to have.
It is, and you mentioned Bronson Reed, and a few of the other guys there like Sexton and these guys are actually starting to get their little pushes as well that I'm starting to see on TV, and even Bronson Reed, he is someone who in the years to come can be an absolute killer. Like,
I'm wearing a Jonah Rock t-shirt right now.
Hey, there you go. I remember seeing Jonah Rock live a few years ago, and I was just like, "Holy shit!" This I he's a lovely dude, but the first time I met him, I was like, "Oh, this guy's a friggin' intimidating looking man." But,
he is so cool. Yeah, I love Jonah. He's great.
Oh, he's a great guy. But how did you find once you were breaking into wrestling and getting past that training stage and starting doing shows? Were you mainly working for PWA, or were you starting to branch out straight away with other promotions in Sydney?
Straight away, I was definitely doing PWA and Newcastle Pro Wrestling. And then quite quickly after, I was doing Wrestling Go as well. Yeah. And then, I mean, in recent times, since promotions like FWA have popped up, I've done FWA a couple of times. Rock and roll wrestling as well, here and there. When there's rock and roll shows, I'll do rock and roll wrestling. But in Sydney, my main promotions would definitely be PWA and Newcastle Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, right. And you were actually crowned the first ever Melbourne City Wrestling Women's Champion. And, how is it to obviously go over to be taken by another state's promotion to go over there, but also to be crowned their first ever women's champion? MCW is a pretty big promotion here in Australia. What did it mean to you to be the one to go in there and to win that title and be the first woman in history to win it?
It's incredible, like the caliber of women that have wrestled for MCW is endless. Like pretty much any female from Australia that has gone on to really great things has gone through MCW. So like Madison Eagles, Toni Storm, Billie Kay, Peyton Royce, Indy, Kelly Skater, even Dakota Kai from New Zealand. Like, so many fantastic athletes have wrestled for MCW, and being able to be crowned the first MCW Women's Champion was just, it was just ridiculous. When I first started wrestling, I just wanted to debut for MCW. I just wanted to wrestle in Thornbury Theatre, and just be able to do that. But to be able to have the run that I had at MCW, especially because my family are there, so my extended family, my grandparents, my brother, all that kind of stuff, it was really cool being able to wrestle in front of my family. So I'm so proud of everything that I did at MCW, and it definitely exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, and for someone who's only been wrestling around for about 2+ years, to be put in that position, really shows that the talent that you possess and the dedication that you put into professional wrestling, and it's undeniable. So it's you should be very proud and very satisfied with that accomplishment. But moving on from that, I think it was last year you actually went over to the United States for the first time. How was that for 2000? It
was 2018.
2018. Sorry, yeah. How was it going? How was it going over to the States for the first time, and seeing how promotions over there do what you do here?
That was terrifying. I love America. So it was great to just go over, because anytime I can go to America, I love it. But wrestling there was really scary, because I'd only been on shows for about a year. So I had no idea what I was doing, really. Like, I was still just figuring it out here. And I was like, stuff it. I'll go to America. I'll see how I go. Luckily, I had like Shazza McKenzie I was traveling with, and she kind of took me under her wing and showed me what to do and what not to do and that kind of thing. I had a couple of the other girls there as well. Initially, I went over because it's Shimmer weekend. So we wrestle for Shimmer and then we do all sorts of other stuff. And I went over just kind of expecting to young boy for the weekend. So just be there, help out, take in knowledge, meet people, shake hands, whatever. Then I eventually actually ended up being able to debut on the main Shimmer show that weekend. So that in itself really, blew my expectations out of the water because I wasn't expecting to get a spot on Shimmer, but it just so happened that I did. So I managed to debut for Shimmer, which was just, a huge goal. Anyone who is a female wrestler should be aspiring to wrestle for Shimmer. It's the who's who of female wrestlers in the world. All you have to do is look at WWE's talent pool, and probably 70% of them have gone through Shimmer. So, yeah, that was such a personal career highlight for me. And then having the opportunity to wrestle at a few different American independents was a really different experience as well. Just seeing how everything works, wrestling with people that I'd never met before, that I haven't wrestled before. I mean, there's moves in Australia that they have different words for in America and all that sort of thing. So that was kind of hard. I had a match with a girl who trained in Mexico, so everything is backwards. Luckily at PWA, we do a whole bunch of lucha training, so I kind of could wrap my head around it, but that was a huge thing. Some matches you have half an hour to put it together, whereas here we had 7. So it was a huge learning experience for me, and it really made me appreciate what we have in Australia.
Yeah, and so you mentioned getting on the Shimmer show. How did that come about? Was it just like right place, right time for you, or was it like they saw you training and thought, we need to get this girl, we need to find her a spot?
So the way that Shimmer works is there is Shimmer, and then there's also a promotion called Rise, which is like Shimmer's sister promotion. So Rise will run the day before. They have like a seminar. If you do well at the seminar, then you might get a spot on the show. If you do well on that show, then you might get a spot on Shimmer in a dark match, so like a non-televised event. And then if you do well in the dark match, then you'll get a spot on the main show. So the whole weekend is like a pecking, you work your way up and maybe you'll get to the end. Anyway, so I did the seminar. I guess I did well. I got on Rise. I didn't do super well. It wasn't my best kind of performance, and I felt like I kind of stuffed it for myself, basically. And then they were like, no, we feel like you didn't get enough of a chance to shine. You didn't really get to show us what you can do, blah, blah. So then I had a dark match for Shimmer the next day, and this was the last day. So I had a dark match, and that was against Raylyn, who is an American independent wrestler, and she's absolutely lovely. And she was basically like, look, I'm already in. I have a spot. This is about you. We need to do whatever we can to make you look good, which her to do that to me was such a beautiful thing. I mean, she could have easily been like, I don't give a shit about this girl. I'll do whatever I want. But she was really good to me. We had a really great match. I did all my power stuff. I really showed what I could do. I mean, we did well. I came backstage and they were like, you did great. I was like, thank God. Anyway, the card for the next show was put up, and I was in a singles match against Cheerleader Melissa, who, if you don't know who Cheerleader Melissa is, people should Google her. Because she is like, she's like how we worship Madison Eagles is how American independent wrestlers worship Melissa. So, I had a singles match against her, which was absolutely terrifying, but it was such a cool experience, and I'm so glad that I was given that opportunity so early.
You would have learned so much after wrestling someone like her. I mean, she's been around for like forever. Like, I don't want to like date her at all, but I think it's probably early 2000s I started hearing about her. She's absolutely, she's a legend. Any pro wrestling fan, if they are a pro wrestling fan, they should definitely know who she is. But when you're in the United States, like how was it for you working with her? Did you gain a lot from that experience, or was it, very much like more you trying to make sure you didn't make mistakes in that match and stuff it up, or were you really sort of taking your time with it and trying to learn as much as you can from her?
So the way that Shimmer works oftentimes is you don't have time to do anything. So we were in that taping, we were the fourth match. This was the second taping of the day without getting too technical. So, but she was wrestling in the first half. So by the time she finished the main event of the first half and we were set to wrestle, there was about half an hour of time, you know? And I was going up to all of my Australian vets, freaking out, being like, guys, what do I do? Like, I can't talk to her until she's done. And like, oh my God, what do I do? And they're like, Steph, don't worry about it. She's the vet. She'll tell you what you're doing. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, she comes backstage. She's like trying to fix her makeup, trying to like change her outfit. She's like, right, what are we doing? And I was like, what? What do you mean? She's like, what have you got for me? And I was like, oh my God, I have absolutely nothing. I was like, fuck. I was like, I can do this. I can do this move. I can maybe do this move. And she was like, okay, we'll do this. Kind of put it all together. We probably went through it once and then her music hits and she's walking out and I'm just standing there like, oh my Lord. And I remember I made my entrance and I was like, right, I know how this match starts. I know how it ends. And I have absolutely no idea what's happening in between. But I was like, I just have to fake it. So I went out there, we did it. And she's just such a pro that as soon as we started, my nerves really relaxed because she was just putting me where she needed me to be. Like, there's like, I guess a saying where it's like people are wrestling themselves. She was wrestling herself because I was just a bloody plank of wood that she was putting in places because I'm sure I had no idea what I was doing. So, but you would have no idea from watching the match, you know, like it was a good match. That's how good she is. She managed to make me, who had no idea what I was doing, look like I knew what I was doing. So it was such a cool experience being able to have a match with her and get feedback from her. And yeah, it was really invaluable for me.
And you mentioned you had a chance to wrestle in a few other of the indie promotions over in the States. Which promotions did you work for when you were over there?
I wrestled for Black Label Pro. I wrestled for Nova Pro Wrestling, which is now closed. And I also wrestled for IWA Mid-South.
Ian Rotten. Okay.
Yes.
His reputation precedes him in the industry. So how did you find going over and working in Louisville and working for Ian?
It was a very interesting experience. It was eye-opening. I think Shazza and I had like a 9-hour bus ride or something ridiculous just to get there. And it was an actual flea market. So it was like a legitimate American flea market. And I was like, oh my God, God bless this country. This is great. So it was about as American indie as you can get, I assume. It was that whole trip for me was just sitting there being like, if I can just get through this and not stuff anything up majorly, I'll be happy. I had a 3-way with Shotzi, Blackheart, and Hudson Envy. That was really cool for me because I absolutely love Shotzi. So being able to wrestle her was so cool. She's so cool. So that was really good. I think that was possibly like my first or second triple threat. So I remember just being like, just get me out. I'll come in. I'll do like 2 things. I have no idea how to wrestle. Just get me out of this match. I was just happy to be there. But yeah, it was a really cool experience. And I'm really glad, as I said, that I got to wrestle Shotzi and obviously Hudson as well. She's great. So the experience as a whole was eye-opening for sure. But yeah, it was cool. I wouldn't change it. It's just one of those experiences where I'll probably never forget it. So it was good.
How'd you find dealing with Ian Rotten? Or did you deal with him at all?
I didn't really deal with him that much. Like it was just kind of like, hey, I'm Steph and bye. Hey, thank you for the money. See ya. So it wasn't a whole, I mean, I've heard stories. Everyone's heard stories. Unfortunately, I don't have anything super juicy to spill.
No,
but
that's all good.
Yeah, it was what it was. I think I was too preoccupied with, it was an all women's show as well. So there was heaps of like really kind of high up indie women there that I was more kind of intrigued by than Ian. So I was just like, bye, Ian. I'm going to go talk to these girls and learn from them.
Yeah, no, I've actually got independent wrestling TV, so I'm gonna have to go and find that card and check it out. So
Yeah, it's on there,
after the interview, I'll get the details off you so I can go watch it. It sounds cool. But
yeah.
Coming back to Australia and from that first trip from the United States, how does it compare from the States to Australia as far as how the locker rooms are, how the productions are? Are the American indies on par with Australia, or would you say that they're miles ahead as far as where Australia should be?
So it's kind of hard because my home promotion is PWA, which is very good. And same with MCW, very good. Like the wrestling is very high standard. The production value is great. So we've got really cool music, lights, screens, all that kind of stuff, which most promotions don't have.
Yeah.
So like I remember one of my America trips, I was like, oh, Shazza, do I need to have my video? And she was like, are you kidding? Like we're in basketball halls. Like, no, you don't. And I was like, oh, okay. I had no idea what I was, getting myself into. So it's just a different vibe. Like I can only speak for my experiences. I've only wrestled at a few indies over there. But I would say that the production level is probably a little bit lower compared to what I do here.
Oh, wow.
And the locker room, I guess it's hard to say. Because in PWA, I feel like we're a huge family. Everyone loves each other. We all have each other's backs, that kind of thing. I guess it's hard to get that vibe if you're not friends with people, like as an outsider at a show, it feels very different than when it's your home promotion. So they very well could be, very similar, but I'm just not a part of it. So I didn't really know. But yeah, as I said, I was more just sitting there trying to not get myself in trouble. So I didn't really pay too much attention to what everyone else is doing. I was just trying to not be in people's way.
Just stand back, learn, and keep quiet, and hopefully no one notices.
Exactly. Just trying to not get heat for stupid stuff.
Sounds like me around my wife all the time. So, so how did you come up with the Python Powerhouse? How did the name and the gimmick come about?
So, when I was Facebook, I had a shoulder injury and I had surgery and I was out for 10 months, which was a really long time. So I missed almost a year. And I remember I had a whole bunch of people come up to me and they were like, oh, so you're going to ditch Facebook, right, when you come back? And I was like, oh, I hadn't really even thought about it. But then I did, and I put some thought into it. I spoke to a whole bunch of different people that I respected their opinions, and everyone was like, you do what you want to do, blah, blah, blah. Everyone just tells you to do whatever you want. And, I was like, I needed someone to be like, yes, yes, you should. Anyway, I was driving to training one day with one of my friends, Lucci, Tree Hugger Lucci, who is an Australian indie guy. And I was talking to him and he was like, right, Steph, if we're going to ditch Facebook, what are you going to do? Who are you instead? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, okay, what do you like? And I was like, I like weightlifting. And he was like, no, too many wrestlers already do that. I was like, shit. He's like, all right, what else do you like? I was like, animals. And he was like, okay, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something we can do with that. So then I was like, okay. He's like, what would you do if you weren't a wrestler? I was like, I'd probably be a zookeeper. He's like, all right, let's work with that. Zookeeper, animals, something like that is going to be cool. And I was like, okay, cool. So that's why my gear has the little collar and the buttons, and it kind of looks, my inspo was like a zookeeper kind of outfit.
Yeah.
So anyways, we came up with that. And then I was trying to come up with a name because Steph De Lander is actually my name. And I couldn't find anything cooler. I was writing down all sorts of stuff. I was trying to find, just a cool name. Nothing sounded cool. Everything was really corny and nothing worked and nothing fit. And when I was Facebook, it felt really far away from who I was as a person. And I wanted this next character to feel very genuine. How people are like, oh, the best characters are themselves turned up to 100. Yeah. I was like, well, maybe I'll just be myself. Maybe that's just it. And, it works. it means I can do the SDL. That works. That's a good chant. That's a good slogan. I can put it on a t-shirt. So I couldn't come up with anything cooler. Many Stephs in wrestling. I mean, there's Stephanie McMahon, but other than that, there's not many out there. So I stuck with that. We came up with the gimmick, and then I was like, right, I need a nickname. And when I was Facebook, I used to call myself the Powerhouse Luchadora. And I really liked having the name Powerhouse in there. So I wanted to keep that. I was playing around with different words that sounded good with Powerhouse. Nothing really stuck. And then I was like, Python Powerhouse? No, that's stupid. I was like, Python? I was like playing around with it. And I was like, does that box me in with snakes though? And then we had a show. And I told the announcer, I was like, stuff it. Call me the Python Powerhouse. He's like, really? I was like, yeah, we'll see. So I did it. And then I did it a few more times. And then I stuck with it. And then, I just became the Python Powerhouse. And that's how it happened.
And so what do you prefer to be? Do you prefer to be in a heel persona, or do you prefer to be a baby face?
I mean, a heel character is pretty natural for me. Like I think especially because I'm bigger, being that bully kind of suits me. It makes more sense. So I would probably prefer being a heel, but every now and again, it is fun to be, a face. It is fun to get that crowd reaction behind you and to be a fan favorite. But if I had to pick one, I would say I'm probably more natural as a heel.
Yeah, you like, just because obviously, as you said, you're bigger than most of the women. You have that sort of bully, that sort of powerhouse mentality as well. Yeah. So, but moving obviously, just outside of wrestling as well, I read an interview about you where for quite a while you went through a period of anxiety and depression. And, was that before your wrestling career started, or was that after your career started that you found yourself going through those feelings?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I still deal with at the moment. And that started probably, I was definitely wrestling. And it was around the time of my shoulder surgery. And I just had quite a few different things in my life kind of building up. I also have IBS, like a type of IBS that I've had for 7 years. So it's a chronic illness. I've been dealing with that for a really long time as well. And that obviously your gut and your brain have a really strong connection. So it's very, very common for people that have IBS to also have anxiety and depression symptoms. So I think that compounded with the fact that I was injured and I was about to, lose the one thing that I loved for 10 months and a few different things together. I did. I got to a point where I was like, wow, I think I actually need to see someone about this. It was something that I was putting off until I couldn't put it off any longer, until it got to a point where it was really affecting my day-to-day life. I went to the doctor and I started seeing a therapist, and I found that was really helpful for me. I mean, as I said, it's still something that I deal with today. I don't think it's something that I'm really ever going to be 100% done with, but I definitely have tools of how to kind of work with it, now better than I did a few years ago. So yeah, it's good now being able to understand what I go through and having ways to deal with it rather than just pressing it down because, you think it's weak or this or that or whatever. I think one of the best things I ever did was actively start looking after my mental health.
And I think that's the thing where in the day and age that we're in now, it's much more socially acceptable to say, hey, I'm not okay. And, just speaking with you, like I've suffered from depression since I was a teenager and only just recently in the last 6 to 12 months have gone and said, no, I want to hit the nail on the head with it for my children. And I can, speaking to you, like obviously hearing your story about it, can see the similarities of how I was thinking as well. I just kept putting it off. But where do you find yourself now? How are you dealing with everything?
I mean, I'm pretty great now. Like I'm on medication for it. I have no problem saying that. And that's something that has helped me tremendously. And I journal and if I need to, I'll see a therapist just to kind of, like touch base. So I have little strategies of how I cope with things. My gut issues are still unsolved. I'm working with it. We're trying different things, this, that, and whatever. So definitely getting better. But I think as long as my health isn't 100%, I think my mental health probably won't be either. But where I'm at now, I have such a better understanding of what I go through and why. And I realize that it's not, as I said, it's not me being weak. It's nothing like that. It's
not at all.
Imbalance. I think understanding that has made it much easier. And especially just explaining to the people around me what I go through, like, you know, my family and my friends and my colleagues, they all have an understanding of what I go through. So it's easier for me to be me, if that makes sense. I'm a very open person. I have no problem telling people my stuff. I'm not a private person at all. Anyone that's close friends with me would know that. Everyone knows my shit, basically. So yeah, but that, for me, I find that easier because I think it explains the way that I am sometimes.
Yeah, no, and I completely understand. As I said, I've been in that same boat and been in that same boat, so I can definitely understand where you're coming from. But how have you found, you know, does wrestling, you know, help with that? Like, obviously, once you had the shoulder injury and you came back from that, you know, did you find that the depression and the anxiety was slowly going away because you were active again and you were active wrestling again?
Yeah, wrestling, without being cliche, and I'm sure there's probably plenty of other people that have said this, but wrestling saved my life. And wrestling is the one thing that if it ever gets really, really hard and I go, you know what, I don't want to do any of this, I can't because I have to wrestle. You know, like, I feel like all I've wanted to do pretty much my adult life is be a wrestler. And I feel like my goal in life is to be a successful professional wrestler. And I can't take that away from myself. You know, I have dreams and I have goals that are probably bigger than most people would see realistic. You know, like, I want to do a lot of shit. And I can't do that if I pack it in, you know. So wrestling and having that stupid, huge dream and goal has, like, even on the darkest days, just like dragged me back. Because, like, no, I can't throw in the towel and sit on the couch and become a piece of shit and stop training and this, that, and just give up because, like, I want to wrestle, you know? So having wrestling as this huge drive has really kept me in line in times where if I didn't have that, like, woof, I would have shut down. Everything would have stopped. But yeah, wrestling really keeps me going.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. When you love something as much as you love wrestling, by the sound of it, there's always going to be that thing where it's you've put in too much hard work to just pack it in now. And, you know, and that's the thing, you know, for you as a talent where you are in the matches I've seen it, you have gotten better over the time. Like, I've seen some of the matches that you started like from a year and a bit ago to sort of like more recent. And you can definitely see the progression in your style, in your ring, in your promos. You know, to me, you know, like I think I can see you going over the States and definitely working for a major promotion in the next couple of years. You know, you definitely have the look, you have the talent to definitely do it. And yeah, we here at MWA would love to see you go over there and, you know, kick some ass over there. So, but yeah, we're coming to the end of that 1 hour mark. And first of all, I just wanted to obviously thank Steph for coming on and being a part of the show and, you know, agreeing to do this interview and obviously talking about things about her personal life as well, which, you know, and saying some things which a lot of people aren't really comfortable about talking about their mental health. But, you know, Steph has been able to gracious to come on and also explain about that. So, Steph, before we sort of start wrapping things up, where can people get in contact with you? Where can they follow you, buy your merch?
So, hold on. So my Instagram is Steph De Lander, and my Facebook should be the same. My Twitter is the same. And then my Big Cartel is stephDelander.bigcartel.com.
Fantastic. And guys, look, just as we're wrapping it up here, I just want to say thank you very much for Steph for coming on our show. Guys, we have got a big weekend coming up, and we'll be dropping the next few names that we'll be having on Shooting the Shit. But guys, please do me a favor. Please click subscribe somewhere above here. And also go over, follow Steph, check out her amazing career, follow her, show her some support, buy some of her merch. And when this quarantine comes out, go and support her and the rest of the Australian talent out there that are busting their ass trying to make a name for themselves. But Steph, look, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
No, just thank you for having me.
It has been my pleasure, Steph. Thank you very much for coming on. Guys, thank you so much for watching Shooting the Shit. I'm Piers Austin. This is the Python Powerhouse, Steph De Lander. And we'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks for watching. See ya.